All right, so hopefully we've given everyone a minute to get their sandwiches ready and join. But welcome everyone again. Thank you for joining us. My name is Christina Caesar and I manage marketing and communications at Synergy Technical, and I have the honor of introducing today's speaker and moderating today's session. Today's webinar will demo how to create business applications using Microsoft Power Apps and Power Automate, which are two of the tools within the entire Microsoft's Power Platform suite. Just a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded, and please drop any comments or questions in the Q&A function within Teams. And just a little bit about us. Synergy Technical is an IT consulting firm headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. We have clients in over 70 countries and all 50 states and manage over 3 million licenses of Microsoft 365 for our clients through our licensing and managed services practice. And wow, I buzzed through that. Jeff, now to introduce our amazing presenter, Jeff Laus. Jeff is a business analyst and SharePoint developer that specializes in the Power Platform suite. You can usually find him working on client projects and development, but I'm so excited that I finally convinced him to do a webinar for Microsoft's productivity suite. And with that raving introduction, Jeff, super quick, I'm going to hand it over to you and we can get things going. I know you have a lot of content that you want to cover, so we can just jump right into it.
All righty, sounds good, Christina. Thank you. So again, everyone, my name is Jeff Lau, and I am really excited to share with you and explore some really powerful technologies from Microsoft today. So we're going to be looking at two different tools from Microsoft, and they're called PowerApps and Power Automate. So if you look on the screen here in this slide, you can see that these two applications are part of a larger suite of tools known as the Power Platform. And so all of these tools can be used to create applications. So this suite of tools was created so that people who are not very familiar with traditional app development and coding can actually come and use these tools and create applications in order to solve their business problems. So we're just going to be exploring the two in the middle here, Power Apps and Power Automate. But I wanted to make you aware of these other tools that are involved as well, just in case down the line you're creating applications and you would like to utilize these tools yourselves. So we have Power BI here on the left. This is your business analytics tool if you're trying to create dashboards and reports, visualizations around your data. Power BI is a great tool to do just that. We also have Power Virtual Agents, that app on the right there. This actually allows you to create virtual chatbots for your users to interact with. I'm sure you've been to a web page before where you had a chatbot pop up on the screen and you could ask it questions and get answers without actually having to talk with a human being. So that's what virtual agents allows you to create. But again, we're just going to be focusing on Power Apps and Power Automate today. So what I want to do is give you a brief overview of these applications, and then we will get into the much anticipated demonstration where you can see these tools actually in action. All right, so what is Power Apps? Power Apps is Microsoft's no-code, low-code app development tool. And so when I say no-code, low-code, I just mean that anyone with any prior experience or no prior experience with coding can actually come into this tool and create applications. So that's what makes Power Apps so unique and powerful, is the fact that you don't need to be super techie or know a lot about code to create some really powerful applications. So there are three types of apps that you can create in Power Apps. We have what is known as Canvas apps, we have model-driven apps, and we have portals. So both model-driven and portals have their place in the Power Apps community. Of course, we can't cover those today. They're a little more complex and would require a separate webinar for both of them. We're going to be focusing on Canvas apps today. And so if you look in to the right of your screen, you'll see this little video clip that I have here that kind of demonstrates how we create Power Apps in the Power Apps Studio. And so when you go into create a new app, you are given just a blank canvas, hence the name Canvas app, and you essentially just are dragging and dropping different elements onto your application. And then you can go and change different properties about these elements, like their color, their size, what they do when a user selects them. And so you can see how easy it is for your ideas to just come alive in these Canvas apps. And so this will all make a little more sense once we hop into the demonstration itself, but that is Canvas applications. Another key point when it comes to these apps is the fact that you can connect to different data sources. And so in our demonstration today, we're actually going to be connecting to a SharePoint list inside of SharePoint. And we can do this through what we call connectors. And so when people start creating Power Apps for the first time, a lot of times they use SharePoint as their data source, specifically SharePoint lists, just because they integrate very well with Power Apps and Power Automate. But the great thing about connectors is there's hundreds of them, and if you're trying to connect to maybe a SQL database or even a Salesforce, you're easily able to connect and bring that data into your application with these connectors. The last thing I want to say is the fact that it's so easy to share these applications with your organization. So once you have completed your application and everything is working as you want it to, you can simply share the app with your whole entire organization, or simply just individuals that you would like to just share the app with. So that's Power Apps. Next, we'll talk about Power Automate. So Power Automate is Microsoft's business process workflow tool. And so the goal of Power Automate is to take your pre-existing manual processes that you have and automate them. So you can spend more time, working on the things that matter and just allow these repetitive, time-consuming tasks just to run seamlessly in the background. So that's the goal of Power Automate, and it's a super powerful tool, which you'll see a little later. But when we go to create these workflows, they are composed of what we call triggers and actions. So every time you create a new workflow, your workflow will start with a trigger. And so a trigger is basically asking the question, what is going to cause your workflow to kick off, to trigger? And so I'm going to keep going back to the demonstration that we're going to be doing today, but we're going to be using a SharePoint list. And each time we add a new item to the SharePoint list, we're going to want a workflow to trigger based on that action. So that is what a trigger is. And just remember that every workflow begins with one. And so we have triggers. We also have actions. And these are simply just the business processes that take place within your workflow. And so the great thing about Power Automate is they already have they already have all the actions that you would need. All you have to do is figure out which action steps that you need, and you just simply drag and drop them into your workflow and configure them. So again, you'll see how that works a little later on. Just like Power Apps, Power Automate also connects to data sources. So this is what allows us to kind of bring in different pieces of data into the workflow, and then we can do different actions on that data. And the last thing I want to say about Power Automate and Power Apps is the fact that we can integrate them together. Of course, you can use Power Automate and Power Apps as standalone applications and do some really powerful things. But it's really powerful when you start using these applications together and create full applications that require no human intervention at all. So that's actually what we're going to be creating today. So we're going to go ahead and get into the demonstration. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to base our demonstration off of a real life scenario that I have actually went ahead and created beforehand. And so you can see here, we have a scenario, and I'm just going to kind of read through some of the bullet points here so we can kind of understand the scenario that we're dealing with. So we're just going to pretend that we are a construction company for a company called Contoso. And so Contoso has a project approval process that they would like to automate. So we have a group of commercial managers. And what they need to do is they need to submit new project forms, and they need to get them approved by a project approval team. So what we need is a Power App that allows them to do that. We need them to have this app where they go in, fill out the form, and submit it. And then so all of this information needs to be stored somewhere. And so we're going to use SharePoint, specifically SharePoint list as our data source. And then so once they submit their forms, we also are going to need a PowerAutomate Workflow to send those approvals out and get the projects either approved or rejected. So on this slide, I just have a couple fields that we're going to be kind of integrating into our application. So we have a commercial manager field. This will just be the field that is used for the name of the commercial manager filling out the form. And we also have project name, estimated completion time, a brief summary of the project. And lastly, we're going to have an attachments control that will actually allow our commercial managers to add a file that's related to the project that they are submitting. And below that, we have the approval email. So we have two members of the project approval team. We have Adele Vance and Miriam Graham. So when a form is submitted, we're going to want approvals to go to each of these members. So that'll come in handy when we start creating the PowerAutomate workflow a little later. But with all that said, so we have our scenario in place. We're going to go ahead and actually create this solution. So I'm going to head over to my desktop here, and we will get started with that. And so here I am right here. I'm at PowerApps.com, and this is just the home page. I'm going to go over here on the left side. I'm going to go to Apps. And so here holds all the apps that you have created thus far, but we're going to create a new app today. So I'm going to go up to the top left and I'm going to click New App. And of course, there's three choices that I mentioned earlier, and we're going to go with the Canvas app. So the first thing it wants us to do is give our app a name. So I'm just going to call it Contoso Project Form. It also wants the format that we would like our app to be in. We have two choices, tablet and phone. If you expect your users to be using your app on a mobile device, you'll want to choose the phone format. But if you expect them to be using it primarily on a desktop, you might want to choose tablet just because it'll give you a lot more space for your app to be created in. So we're going to use phone for this particular demo. So I'm going to choose that and I'm going to click Create. So this is going to open up my PowerAutomate Studio, and you'll see right away that PowerApps gives us one screen that we can start working with. And if you look over here, point your attention over to the left side, you can see that we have something called the tree view. And the tree view is basically just the table of contents of our application. So everything that we add to our app will show up in this tree view. And you'll kind of see how that works when I start adding different controls to the app. But as I said, when you open up a Canvas app and you create a new one, PowerApps gives you one screen that you can start out with. And you can see that right here, screen one. And I'm just going to double tap on that. And this will allow me to change the name of our screen. Call this main screen. It's important that you just rename all of the controls that you add, just so you know what their functions are. And so I have main screen selected here. And if I go over to the right side, you'll see I have something, this is called the properties panel. And this is where I can start changing the different properties of whatever I had selected on the left side here. So we can see that I have the main screen selected here. And I'm going to go and change some of the properties. So the first property I can change is the fill color. Maybe I just want to make it this light blue color here. I can do that. And you can see it instantly changes on my canvas. There's not a lot of different properties that you can change about the screen, but you could add a background image if you wanted to. You could change the image position on the Canvas app. But what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to start adding some controls to the app. And the way we do that is we go up to the top left, there's a tab called Insert. And so when I click that, we have a bunch of different controls that we can add to the app. There's just so many that you can choose from. Of course, we can't go through all of them today, but we're going to go through a couple right now. I'm going to start adding them to my app. So the first thing we're going to add is a label. So I can just select label. You can see it instantly gets placed on my canvas, and now I can just start moving it around and getting it exactly how I want it placed on my app. So I'm just going to stretch it across there. And you can see here on the left side that when I added that, it got added to my tree view right underneath the main screen. And so I'm just going to go ahead and change the name. I'm going to type in LBL for label. I'll just call this title. So that's just the naming convention that I'm using for all of my controls. It's just important that you kind of create one of these in the beginning and stay consistent with it, and you'll kind of see why in a little bit. But so I named that, and I'm going to go over to the properties panel, and I'm going to start changing the properties of my label. I'm just going to call this project form, and we'll just change some of the other properties here, maybe make it a little bigger. But all of this should kind of look familiar if you've used other Office 365 applications in the past. Microsoft has done a good job kind of making everything look very similar to those other applications, so things kind of seem intuitive. So I'll change the color, maybe that, make it stand out a little bit. All right, so we got our label, and now what we want to do is we want to bring in a form. So if you remember in the beginning, we had all of those fields that we want to allow our commercial manager to fill out and submit. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to SharePoint, and I have already pre-created a list, and it's called Project Proposals. And so I created this in a site called Contoso Project Site. And I went ahead and did this just because it takes a little, might take a little long to create this list. So I went ahead and did that, and you can see I have all the fields that we need in our app: commercial manager, project name, etc. And I also have this field here at the end called status. And so this is going to basically tell our user, is the project approved, is it pending, or is it rejected? So there's going to be three choices that our status field can be. And so this will come into play a little later on. But we have our SharePoint list, and we basically want to bring this list into our application. So how do we go about doing that? I'm going to head back over to PowerApps, and I'm going to go up to Insert again. And there's a tab called Forms, and I want to bring in an edit form. So what I'll do is just drag this where I want it on my app. I'll drag it down the canvas. I'm going to leave a little room at the bottom here because I'm going to be adding a submit button a little later on. But you can see with my form selected, you can see that it says this form isn't connected to any data yet. So what we need to do is we need to connect it to our SharePoint list. And so the way we do that is we select our form, we go over to the properties here, and the first property we can change about our form is the data source. And so if I click on that, I'm able to type in whatever data source that I am trying to connect my app to, and in our case, it's SharePoint. So I'll type in SharePoint, and you'll see the little SharePoint icon here, and I can simply just select it, select the account, and then it wants to me to select the site in which our list resides in. We know it's in the Contoso project site. And here it wants the list name. We only have one list in our site. It's called Project Proposals. So I'll click on that, and then I can click Connect. And so PowerApps is going to bring all of those fields in our SharePoint list into our application. And you can see it did that very nicely. And so we have all the fields. We also have the status field, which we don't really need our user to fill out in the form, so we can get rid of that. And maybe we also want to kind of rearrange our fields in a different way. And so the way we'll do that is we'll go over to the Properties panel once again, and there's a little place called Edit Fields. And so I'm just going to click that, I'm going to get rid of status. I'm just going to click remove. And what I'll also do is just drag these around and kind of rearrange them. So maybe we want commercial manager at the top there. And that's looking pretty good. Another thing I want to do is I want to make the brief summary of the project. I want this field to be a little bigger for my user to type in their summary. So I'm just going to click on their field. I can go over to the properties panel and I'm just going to scroll down. There's actually a property called mode. And right now it's single line. I just want to make this multi-line. And then what I'm also going to do is just drag this field to make it a little bigger. And I'll also make the attachments field a little smaller as well. So you can see how easy it is just to make your form, make your app look exactly how you want it to. So we'll just make that a little smaller so we don't have a scroll bar. All right, so our form is looking pretty good now. The last thing we need to do is add a submit button so our users can submit this form to our data source. And so again, I'll go up to insert and I'll click button. So that'll give me a button and I'll just place this here at the bottom. And I'm just going to change a couple things about our button here. We'll just stay consistent with all the colors. All right, so we have our button now, and you can actually preview. Let me move this up just a little bit. You can actually preview your application and see what the user will see when they open the app. And you do that by going up to the top right. There's this preview button. And so if I go there, we can see that it says knows item to display. So there's an important property that I need to change about my form so we can have a new form. So I'm just going to select my form. I'm going to go over to the properties and there's this property called default mode. And right now it's set to edit. I just need to simply change this to new. So a new form will be displayed every time my user accesses the application. So now if I preview my app, we should see the form. Awesome. And if I click the submit button, nothing's happening. This is just because we have not configured the button to do anything yet. So we'll get to that a little later. But what I want to do now is I want to create one more screen for our application. And so this screen is going to be used for whenever a user comes in, fills out the form, submits it. We want them to land on a screen that says that their form was submitted successfully. So we're going to create a new screen. And we go to the top right, there's this new screen button here. I can click on that. I could add a blank screen if I wanted to, but PowerApps has all of these template screens that we can choose from, and they actually have controls already pre-configured. So we're actually going to take advantage of one of these. There's one called Success. Okay, so when I click on that, it gets added to my app in my tree view. I'm going to go ahead and change the name of my screen. And I'll also make the color the same. We'll stay consistent here. And lastly, I'll just change this label. We'll make it say something a little different here. So the project submitted successfully. So this is going to be our landing screen for our user when they submit the form. Now, the last thing we want to do is add a button to the screen so they can navigate back to the main form screen. So I'm going to go up to button and I'm going to add that. And we'll just place it down here. Again, I'm just going to change a couple properties here. And we'll just say back to form. All right, so I'm just going to click on this button and I want you to turn your attention up to the top left here. We have this little drop-down menu here, and this is called the properties drop-down. And so I have all the different properties here as I have over in my properties panel. However, I can start adding different functions to these properties up here. So I'm going to kind of demonstrate that. So when I select my button, I have a property called onSelect. And so the onSelect property is in charge of what happens when a user clicks my control. So right now we can see that the onSelect property is equal to false. And so that's why our button doesn't do anything when I click it. So I'm going to get rid of this false. And so now we need to write a function that navigates us back to the form screen. And so when I say write a function, PowerApps has a programming language that they have created, and it's called PowerFX. And it's actually based off of Excel functions. So if you're really good with Excel, you'll actually pick this up quite easily. But if you're not, no worries. It's actually very intuitive. And PowerApps actually has this little drop-down menu right here, which actually gives you all the available functions that you can use. And so again, we want to write a function that navigates us to the form screen. So I'm going to use a function called navigate. And so I'll just go ahead and type that in. You can see there it is. And so whenever we write a function, we type in the function name and then we open up a parentheses. And if we look above this, it actually tells us the parameter that this function requires. And we see that it requires a target. And it tells you the definition of that parameter. And it says the target screen that we want to navigate to. If we look over here at the tree view, we know that we want to navigate to our main screen. So I'm going to type in main. And there it is. I'll just select it. And then I will close my parentheses. So it's that easy to write a function that's going to navigate us back to our form screen. So I'll demonstrate this. I'll go ahead and preview the app. And if I click this, we can see it navigates us back to our form screen. All right, so the last thing we need to do is we need to configure our submit button. We need to configure it to not only take us to the success screen, but we also want it to submit our form to our SharePoint list, right? So I'm going to click our submit button. Again, we can see that the onSelect property is selected here, and again, it's set to false. So I'm just going to get rid of that. And so I'm going to, again, use the navigate function. And this time, instead of going to our main screen, we want to go to our success screen. So I'll simply just click that. Close our parentheses. And so we also want our submit button to submit the form. So in order to add multiple different functions to a control, we can separate these functions by using a semicolon. So I'll do that. And I'm going to utilize the function called submit form. There it is. And it says, the parameter says form, the form which I want to submit. If we look over here in our tree view, we can see that our form is called form 1 right here. And so I'm going to start typing that in. And there it is, form 1. There we go. And so there's one more function that I want to add to this property, and that is reset form. I want to reset the form so when they go back, all of their previous inputted data is cleared. So I'm going to use another function called reset form. And there's my form 1, because that's the one we want to reset. And close my parentheses, and we're good to go. So when a user selects the submit button, it's going to navigate us to our success screen. It's going to submit our form, and then it's going to reset our form. All right, so our app is complete. What we can go ahead and do is test it out and see if it works. So what I'll do is I'll just preview, and we can go ahead and fill in some of this information. So we'll just say 16 months to complete the project. summary for us. And so attached file, this control allows us to actually open up our file explorer, and we can select a file. So I actually have Project Titan, have this PDF already created. So I'll select that and I can submit the form. And there we go to our success screen, and I can navigate back to the form, and we can see that our form is cleared and reset as well. So the real question is, did this submit to our data source, SharePoint? I'm going to go to our SharePoint list, and it's not there, but I'm going to refresh our screen. And we see that this has successfully submitted to our SharePoint list. So we've created an application that allows our commercial managers to submit the forms. But now our forms just simply sit in the SharePoint list and nothing is happening. So what we need to do now is create a PowerAutomate workflow that is triggered each time a new form is submitted to this list. So we need to go ahead and create that piece of our application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to PowerAutomate. I'm going to first delete this, and we'll create another one a little later. But I'm going to go ahead and head over to PowerAutomate. You can see that this layout looks very familiar. It looks exactly like PowerApps, really. And so I'm going to go over here to My Flows. And you'll see that this is all the flows that you've created thus far. But we want to create a new flow. So I'm going to go up to this New Flow button here and select that. So we have three options. These are the three primary flows that you can create in PowerAutomate. We have automated, which is the one that we're going to be using. This is going to be an automated flow is the one that we want to be triggered based on a new item being added to our list. But we also have two other options. We could have an instant flow, and actually have an example of one here. So this is called parent flow, and the way you run an instant flow is you simply just click on this little play button. So say I created an instant flow and I want to run it, I can simply click here and run the flow. So it's kind of an ad hoc method of running a flow that you created. You could also create a scheduled flow. Say maybe you want to run a flow Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. each day. You could configure that with a scheduled flow. But again, we're going to use automated for this demonstration. I'm going to call this Contoso Project Approvals. And we can go ahead and configure the trigger that we need. So of course we want our flow to trigger each time a new item is created. So you can search through these triggers and find the one that you need for your situation. Luckily, this is a very popular trigger in PowerApps, so it's actually located right here at the top. So it's when an item is created, we can see that it's using the SharePoint connector here. So I'll select that and push create. And so we can see that our trigger gets placed at the top of our workflow. And what we can go ahead and do is start configuring our trigger. So I'm actually going to rename our trigger first. And it's important to rename both our triggers and our actions, just if we come in here maybe a month later to make some changes, we know exactly what each action is doing. So now I can configure my trigger. What it wants is the site address and the list name. So we know that we're using the Contoso project site. So I'll just select that. And our list name is the only list we have, project proposals. And so that's all we have to do for our trigger. And what we can go ahead and do is start adding our action steps. And so I'll click New Step. And the first thing we want to do is send an email to our commercial manager who fills out the form. We want to just say that your form has submitted successfully and is going out for approval. So I typed in send email, and there's a bunch of different actions that are related to sending an email, but I'm going to use this one right here, send an email version 2 from the Office 365 Outlook. So I'll just select that. And what we can go ahead and do is change these properties and configure them. So the first property it wants is, who's this email going to? Well, we want it to go to the person who has submitted this form. So it's going to be dynamic. It's not going to be the same person every time. So if I click the box here, I can actually use what we call dynamic content. And you'll see this button right here. And I'll just simply select that. And here is all the dynamic content that we can use from our trigger. So we have access to all those different fields in our SharePoint list. And we also have pieces of dynamic content related to the user who submitted the form. So we can see we have created by email, we have created by display name. For this particular property, we want the email. So I'll just select that. We can give our email a subject. Project submitted successfully. And then what we can do is go ahead and compose the body of the email. So again, I want to use a piece of dynamic content. We're going to use the created by display name, which will be the full name of our user. So I'll do that. We'll do a comma, add some space here. And we'll say the project you have submitted titled. Now we need the project name. So again, we can go to the dynamic content and we can get that project name related to that project that they submitted. So I'll just click that. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill out the rest of this email. So it has submitted successfully and is awaiting approval from the approval team. You'll receive another email once the project has been approved and rejected. So I'll just finish out the email with PowerAutomate. And we're good to go with that action. So now we can go ahead and add some more actions that we need. So I'll click New Step. And so the next step we're going to do is we're going to change our status of the item to pending. So if you remember back, we have the status field. And so we have three options that this field can be set to. We have pending, approved, and rejected. So what we want to do now is change it to pending. So we can use an action called update item. And there it is. I'll just click it. And we're just going to configure its properties. So give it the site address, the site name, and lastly, it wants the ID of this item. And so we can get the ID of the item in our dynamic content. It's actually the only dynamic content allows you to use. So I'll just select the ID. And then we can go down to the status field and change this to pending. And that's all we have to do for that action. I'm going to go ahead and save my flow. It's important that you just save the flow often so you don't lose any of your work. So I'm going to add a new step. And this step is going to send out our approval to our project team. So I'll type in approval. We have three different ones that we can choose from. I'm just going to go with start and wait for an approval. And I'll just change the name of this. So basically, when our workflow gets to this step, our workflow is not going to continue until both of our project team members approve or reject the project, and then our flow will continue running. Let's go ahead and configure this. We could choose first to respond, but I'm going to choose everyone must approve because we want both of those members to approve our project. And so now we can go ahead and just fill in the rest of these properties. So for the title, just fill in that. I also have both of our project team members here and their emails. So I'll just paste those in there, and I separated them with a semicolon. But those are the emails in which our approval is going to be sent to. All right, and then I have the details here. I went ahead and just wrote these out, so I don't have to type it in. So we have approval team. A new project has been submitted by our created by display name. That'll be their full name. Please review the project and approve or reject. So down here, I can actually add the link to the item so that my approvers can go into the item and look at all the information. So if I go to my dynamic content, there's a piece of dynamic content called link to item. And so I'll just select that. I can also give my item a description. So I'll just call it project information. All right, and that's all we have to do for our approval step. All right, so that'll send out our approvals. I'm going to add a new step. And this step is going to be called a condition. So I'll type that in, I'll choose my condition. And so a condition allows us to compare two different values. And based on that condition, we can send our workflow down two different pathways depending on the condition. So what we want to do is choose two values to compare here. And so I'll just select the first value box here. And we're going to choose, we're going to go to our dynamic content and go to our approval dynamic content. And we can see that there is a piece called outcome. And so the outcome will either be approve. There's two members of the approval team, so it will either be approve, or maybe it will be approve and reject, depending on the choice of the approvers. But we want to say, does the outcome not contain the word reject? So if the outcome does not contain reject, we're going to send our workflow down this pathway. If it does contain reject, we're going to send our workflow down this path. So what we can go ahead and do is start adding different action steps down these pathways. And so I'll start with the if yes path. The first thing I'm going to do is send an email to my commercial manager, just saying that their project has been approved. So again, I'm going to use that same email action there. And I will just configure it to go to my commercial manager. All right, let's just say project approved for the subject. And I went ahead and created a pre-written body here, basically saying the project has been approved, and if they have any questions, they can contact the approval team. That's all we have to do for that step. The last thing we're going to do is simply update our item status to approved. Use the update item action as we used before. And we'll just fill in some of these properties. We'll give it the ID of the item. And we'll change the status to approved. All right, so we're almost done. Next, we just simply need to have these same actions happen on this side of the workflow. So an easy way to get these actions over to this side is by copying them over. And the way we do that is simply just click on these three dots here, and I can copy into my clipboard. And this is one of my favorite features that just allows us to simply copy and paste our actions. So if I go here, I can actually go to my clipboard and I can paste this action over here. So there it is. And I also want the update action as well. And so what I'll do is simply just change some of this information. Project rejected. I can go ahead and get rid of this body here. paste in my new one. This is just saying that the project has been rejected and that they can contact the approval team if they have any questions about their decision. All right, and I'll just simply change this as well. Update project to reject. And all I need to do here is change the status to rejected so that we can update the status. All right, so we're good to go. We've created our workflow that does exactly what we want it to do. And so I can go ahead and save the flow. And so I'm just going to back out and go to just the main summary page of our workflow. So we can see we have the our Contoso project approvals. And so down here, I have a 28 run history of my flow. So every time my flow runs, we'll see a little instance of our flow. So you'll better see what this is when we actually test out our solution. So I'm going to head over to our Power App that we have created. I'm going to go ahead and fill in all the information and we'll test out the full working solution here. So I'm just going to fill in the same information as I did before. We'll attach our file and I will submit. All right, if I go to my SharePoint list, we see that our item has been submitted successfully. Right now our status is just blank. If I go back to our Power Automate here, we can see that there's this little refresh button. And so basically our Power Automate Workflow is listening to our SharePoint list. And when it recognizes that a new item has been added to the list, it will trigger. So right now it's just kind of a waiting game. Sometimes it can take up to a minute to actually recognize that a new item has been added. But we're simply just going to wait on this to trigger. I also will say that I have our emails up here of our project approval team. So we'll actually be able to see those emails that we configured in our workflow once this triggers here.
Jeff, it's okay. I talk to my bank all the time.
Yeah, sometimes it's like right away.
Yeah, sometimes it may take a hot second.
Yeah. Or for some reason I did it wrong and it's not going to work. There we go.
Okay, true.
There we go. So we can see that this happened 3 seconds ago. And so if I click into this instance, and you can see the sound of emails that are arriving, so we know our flow is working. But if you look at this flow, we can see that we have check marks next to the actions that have completed successfully. And it says your flow is running. And so right now there's this little pending icon next to our approval step. So right now our flow is waiting on our approval members to approve or reject the project. So I have my email up here pulled up as well. So we can see that I have received an email saying that my project was submitted successfully. And I also have the 2 other members of the approval team. So this is Adele Vance's email, and we can see that she received a new project proposal. So here she can approve or reject the project. She can also click into that link that we gave her to click into, so she can see all of the information about the project. She could open up this attachments as well down here if she wanted to look at those. I'm just going to close that out. And so I'm going to go ahead and approve it. So she can type in comments if she'd like, and then push submit. Okay, so Adele approved the project. I also have Miriam Graham, the other approver, and she received the exact same proposal. So she can do the same exact thing. I'm just going to have her approve it. All right, and so I received another email saying that the project has been approved. And so if I go to our SharePoint list, we can see that that just changed. If you saw, it was at pending and it changed to approve automatically because we configured that in our flow. And if we go back to our Power Automate flow, we can see this big green banner that says that our flow has run successfully and it is completed. So there we go. We have created a full working solution that basically solves the business problem that we had. So we created a Power App application that allows our commercial managers to come in, submit the form, and then we had all of that information be stored in our SharePoint list. And once it was submitted to the list, we had a PowerAutomate workflow that kicked off and sent out those approvals to be approved or rejected. And so based on that decision, we had our little status field change from either pending to rejected or pending to approved. So that is really it. You can see how easy it is to just create a quick solution using PowerApps and Power Automate. And what I really hope is that you took away from this how powerful these tools can be and how you can hopefully utilize these in different situations that you have at your company. But with all that being said, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and open up the floor for some questions that you may have about everything that I've covered today. So we'll go ahead and continue to that.
First of all, I wish this was in person so everyone could clap for you, but seriously, Jeff, you crushed this. And I am so excited from marketing and sales behalf that we finally got you this because Jeff is such a pro on this subject and I'm so excited. And all right, let's jump into Q&A. So how do you share the apps within the organization?
So that's a very great question. And PowerApps have actually made it very simple for us to share applications with others in your organization. So I'll just go ahead and share that with you guys. So if we're at PowerApps and we've created our application and it's working like we want it to, I can go ahead and go to File and I can go ahead and save. That's the first step to sharing your application is saving it. Saving seems important. Yes. And you actually probably should have saved it as you work on it, just so if your browser crashes or whatever, you don't lose all this work you've done. But so you save it, and then we also have a button right after that says share. So if I click that, it'll ask me to leave the page. That's fine. This will take us to, I'll just go ahead and exit out of this real quick. Go back to our main apps page here. And we can see that, again, this is where all your apps that you've created thus far will reside. And we see that we have the Contoso project form. And so I'm just going to go to the three dots here and go to the details of our app. And so here we have this web link. So we could simply just email this to any users that we wanted to access this app. We could just send this to them. We could also pin this app into a Teams channel if we would like. That there's capabilities that allow you to do that. But in order for these people to actually access the app, we need to share it with them so they have the right privileges and permissions. So you can see that I went up here to share. And here I can simply just type in the email of the user I want to share with. So maybe I wanted to share it with Isaiah. He's part of this organization. I can simply just click their name here. I can make them a co-owner if I wanted them to also be able to edit the app. And there's this little check mark down here that allows me to send an invitation to them via email, and they can open up the app that way. But also, if I wanted to share it with the entire organization, I could just type in everyone, and that gives me this little tab here, everyone in Contoso. And so that will allow the whole organization to be able to access the application. So it's very easy to share this app with others and allow them to open up and consume the app you have created.
So that actually perfectly leads into my next question. How do you share this offline? Like, how does this work offline?
Actually,
I guess sharing offline. How do you use PowerApps offline? Is what
yeah. So
sorry.
No problem. That's a very good question as well. And there's actually a way you can configure apps to run offline in the app itself. It's a little more complex to create an app that's you're able to use offline, but it is definitely possible. And I've created apps that do exactly that. But basically, all the information that you store. So let's say you go in and submit that form that we've created today. PowerApps actually will store that in your mobile device. You'll actually store it on your local device, and then when you actually connect to the internet eventually, then all of that data will be sent to SharePoint. So again, it's something you have to configure, and it's a little more complex, but it's definitely doable in PowerApps. Okay.
Awesome. Well, so I'm not seeing any more questions right now in the Q&A, but I will give everyone a minute to drop one in. But
sure.
I would like to say thank you so much to Jeff again. I'm so excited to see his future content. He's doing another webinar next month. We'll see what the content is, but I think it's more on the Power Platform. Thank you everyone though for attending today. You will receive a follow-up email with the recording to this webinar by tomorrow. And in the future, please be sure to keep up with us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or actually check out our events page for more upcoming webinars. And then, God, I need to speak more slowly like you. So I'm not seeing any more questions in the Q&A function right now, but if you do have any more questions on any of the topics covered today, please just reach out to me and I will connect you with Jeff or the appropriate AE. And thank you again for joining us today. I hope you have a great one. I know we got it on the minute. Nicely done, Jeff.
Awesome.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great one. Bye.